The rain had just let up over Washington, D.C., the clouds still swollen with threat, when the unthinkable happened. A shot echoed through the corridors of power, and in seconds everything shifted. Whispers turned into rumors, rumors became headlines, and before dawn, a single name dominated every channel: Charlie Kirk. The official reports called it an attempted assassination by a lone deranged shooter. But behind the polished press releases and tightly managed statements, another version of the story began to surface, one that spoke of manipulation, missing evidence, and a coordinated cover-up that redefined the meaning of silence. What if the security footage that night didn't fail, but was deliberately cut? What if witnesses were threatened into changing their statements? What if the blood on the floor wasn't the only thing wiped clean? From that night forward, a question haunted every investigator brave enough to look deeper. Was this an attack on a man, or an erasure of truth? The answers didn't lie in the reports. They hid in the inconsistencies, in the pieces that didn't fit, in the stories the public was never allowed to hear. The media moved on fast, calling it an isolated incident. Yet inside intelligence circles, panic brewed. Files disappeared, names were blacked out, and a silent war for control of the narrative began. Some called it damage control, others cleanup. But those who've seen this pattern before know what it really means. Someone somewhere didn't just want Charlie Kirk dead. They wanted the truth to die with him. In this investigation, we'll piece together those missing hours. We'll trace every lie, every quiet exchange, every hidden hand behind the scene. Because power, when cornered, doesn't play by rules. It rewrites them. Each episode will take you one step closer to what really happened that night, and who ordered it buried. As we begin, ask yourself one thing. When a man's silence serves the powerful, who ensures he stays silent? And when the world calls it justice, what if it's just the sound of a well-oiled machine erasing the evidence? Stay with me till the end. The story you're about to hear isn't just about politics or conspiracy. It's about how truth is murdered, quietly. It was just past midnight when Charlie Kirk exited the gala held in an old colonial hotel near Capitol Hill. The air was thick with post-storm humidity, the streets glistening under flickering streetlights. Inside, powerful figures had toasted the night away. Politicians, donors, and strategists, all shaking hands and smiling for the cameras. But beneath the music and laughter, something felt off. Security agents were tense, their earpieces buzzing with static, and a few guests whispered about a strange man seen lingering near the staff corridor. Still, Kirk brushed it all off and walked toward the lobby with his team, unaware that within minutes, the night would erupt in chaos. As he stepped out toward his armored SUV, a single loud crack split the air. For a moment, nobody moved. Then panic exploded. Kirk's bodyguard tackled him to the ground. Shouts echoed across the marble steps, and guests screamed as glass shattered. The sound of the gunshot bounced through the street like a nightmare refusing to fade. Within seconds, security radios went dead, and surveillance feeds from the East Wing froze, displaying nothing but grainy static. The shooter had aimed well, a professional's precision, not a madman's gamble. When law enforcement arrived barely minutes later, something strange was already happening. Federal vehicles had surrounded the hotel, men in suits were taking over the scene, and local officers were ordered to step back. The first statement was short and rehearsed. A targeted attack has been neutralized. The suspect fled. Investigation ongoing. But inside those walls, it wasn't an investigation. It was containment. Evidence was being collected, then replaced. Cell phones were confiscated. The security DVR, which should have recorded everything, was accidentally reformatted. Witnesses began whispering, and then, one by one, stopped. A waiter who claimed he saw a second shooter was sent home and never called again. A journalist who tried to post live footage found her account suspended. Another guest's video, showing two figures fleeing opposite directions, vanished from her gallery overnight. Even the cleaning crew was replaced by an emergency federal maintenance team before dawn. Their task simple: wash everything away. By morning, the news told a neat, controlled version of events: a lone shooter, chaos, and quick rescue. But the people who'd been there knew something didn't add up. The angle of the bullet didn't match the reported direction. The sound of two distinct shots was ignored. The faint smell of bleach clung to the floors long after sunrise. A journalist later described it perfectly. It wasn't an investigation. It was choreography. The night of the attack should have ended in clarity. Instead, it birthed confusion. What was supposed to be a tragic but straightforward act of violence had become a masterpiece of misdirection. And while Charlie Kirk lay recovering in a private, undisclosed location, someone, somewhere, was already rewriting history, one redacted page at a time. By dawn, the hotel where the attack had taken place had transformed from a scene of chaos into eerie silence. The marble lobby, once filled with shattered glass and frightened voices, was spotless, unnaturally so. The cleaning crews had worked all night, though no one could say who hired them. They weren't the regular hotel staff. They wore no uniforms, carried no ID badges, and spoke in short-coded phrases. Even more chilling, the moment reporters arrived at 6 a.m., every surveillance camera in the building was conveniently offline for maintenance. The hotel manager, pale and trembling, told one journalist he'd been instructed not to release anything for national security reasons. That phrase, national security, would soon become the shield behind which the truth disappeared. Inside, a secure room on the 8th floor, 2 agents from an unnamed federal division sat with the hotel's IT administrator. On the desk were the DVR hard drives containing the night's surveillance data. They plugged one into a terminal, and after a few seconds of clicking through folders, something became clear. Every video from 11:30 p.m. to 12:45 a.m. was missing. Not deleted, not damaged, just gone. No logs, no timestamps, no traces of tampering, as if the footage had never existed. The IT head muttered that the security system wasn't connected to the internet. Such a wipe could only have happened manually from within the system. That meant one thing: someone had been inside that control room during the attack. Meanwhile, outside in the parking lot, journalists were blocked behind yellow tape. One of them, a young freelancer named Daniel Ross, had captured fragments of footage before his phone was taken. The short clip showed flashes of light, 2 gunshots, and a black SUV speeding away in the opposite direction of Kirk's convoy. Within hours, Daniel's clip vanished from his social media, his post flagged as misinformation. His account was suspended, his phone confiscated for forensic review, and his name quietly appeared on a watch list. Later that day, he would tell a friend, "I think I filmed something I wasn't supposed to see." That was the last message he ever sent. Back inside the hotel, local officers were growing uneasy. Detective Alvarez, one of the first responders, tried filing his preliminary report. But when he returned from lunch, the file had been sealed by higher authority. He wasn't allowed access to his own notes. Chain of command, they told him. He protested, and by the next morning he was reassigned to desk duty. His colleagues whispered that he'd crossed a line. When asked later about the missing footage, Alvarez only said, "Whatever happened that night, it wasn't meant for the public." By evening, the official story solidified: a lone gunman, still at large, motive unclear. But people close to the case started noticing peculiar inconsistencies. Why were the bullet casings recovered not matching the weapon described in the report? Why did the body cam of one security officer show a timestamp mismatch of exactly 23 minutes? And most importantly, why did the government claim to have no copies of the hotel surveillance when technicians confirmed backups existed in an off-site server? The silence around these questions grew heavier, suffocating anyone who tried to speak. Outside the hotel, a single flickering streetlight became the symbol of the night's mystery. Locals began gathering there, leaving notes and flowers, some believing Kirk had died, despite official claims he was recovering. Rumors turned to fear. A woman who lived across the street swore she saw men in black suits, loading heavy boxes into an unmarked van hours before sunrise. Whether she saw equipment, evidence, or something far worse, no one knows. But the message was clear. Every trace of that night was being erased, one file, one memory at a time. And somewhere deep within the system, someone was pressing delete. Not just on data, but on truth itself. Morning light spilled across the polished lobby of the hotel, revealing no trace of the terror that had erupted just hours earlier. The official cleanup had been so thorough it looked as though nothing had ever happened. But the real cleanup, the silencing, was only beginning. Witnesses were everywhere that night. Waiters, drivers, security staff, guests, even a few residents of nearby buildings. Yet within 48 hours, their voices began to vanish, one after another. The hotel's head waiter, who had told reporters he heard 2 distinct gunshots, suddenly refused to speak further. When a journalist returned for follow-up, the man's apartment was empty, his phone disconnected, his co-workers claiming he had taken leave to visit family. No one ever saw him again. Across town, a rideshare driver named Malik reported something strange. He'd picked up a nervous passenger from the alley behind the hotel minutes after the attack. The passenger had blood on his sleeve and carried a small metallic case. Malik filed a report, but when police called him in for questioning, they didn't ask about the passenger. They questioned his immigration status. 2 days later, Malik was detained for unrelated reasons and deported within a week. The official record made no mention of his report. Whatever he saw that night, it vanished along with him. Another witness, a young caterer named Haley, uploaded a voice note to her private group chat the morning after the attack. In it, she whispered, "There were 2 shooters. I saw one drop something, like a chip or maybe a tracker." Her friends tried reaching her after hearing the message, but Haley's phone was already off. When her roommate went to check, her room was empty, her clothes gone, and her social media wiped clean. The message she left behind was deleted hours later, replaced with a system note: media unavailable. Inside the hospital where Charlie Kirk was reportedly recovering, even nurses began noticing unusual activity. Unknown personnel, dressed as plain-clothed officers, monitored the hallway outside his room. One nurse, curious and concerned, checked the digital entry log and found the same 2 IDs used to enter the restricted floor 23 times in one night. When she raised questions to her supervisor, she was told she'd been reassigned for her own safety. She never returned to work. The hospital later released a statement saying Kirk had been moved to a secure facility for privacy reasons. No one outside the inner circle ever saw him again. By now, the public narrative was airtight. Officials repeated the same words: lone shooter, unstable mind, politically motivated. But in private, the cracks widened. Journalists who pushed too hard began receiving anonymous calls. Low, monotone voices warning them to let it go. One investigative reporter, Emily Rhodes, found a dead bird nailed to her apartment door with a note reading, "Stories can die too." She dropped the investigation the next day and vanished from media entirely. It became clear that anyone who had seen too much or asked too many questions was being erased in plain sight. Whispers spread across online forums, late-night podcasts, and encrypted channels. Talk of a shadow team tasked not with solving the attack, but with cleansing it from public memory. Some called them the Quiet Unit, others simply the Fixers. No documents proved they existed, yet their work was unmistakable. Every name linked to the night of the attack was fading, every clue dissolving like ink under acid. Those who once shouted began whispering, those who whispered went silent, and silence, as always, served only one master: power. The truth hadn't died. It had been buried alive. Days turned into weeks, and while the public was told Charlie Kirk was in stable condition, recovering under heavy protection, something didn't feel right. No photos surfaced, no hospital statements were verified, and even his family seemed to have gone underground. The few people who tried to send get-well cards received them back, stamped undeliverable. Reporters stationed outside every major D.C. hospital saw nothing. No sign of motorcades, no visits from colleagues, no confirmation of where he was being treated. It was as though the man at the center of the most shocking political attack in recent history had been lifted out of reality. The government called it protective relocation. Insiders whispered a different word: containment. Inside an unnamed facility on the outskirts of Virginia, the walls hummed with fluorescent light and silence. According to one anonymous nurse who later fled the country, the patient in room 12B matched Kirk's physical description: tall, lean, with a stitched wound across the shoulder. But his wristband carried no name, only a barcode. Armed guards watched the hallway 24/7, and every medical staffer entering the room had to sign non-disclosure agreements that mentioned national security. The nurse said the patient rarely spoke, but once, when she checked his vitals, he grabbed her wrist and whispered, "They shot me." But it wasn't who they said. Before she could ask more, a guard ordered her out. She was reassigned the next morning and told never to mention that room again. Meanwhile, in the outside world, public trust began to fracture. Supporters demanded proof that Kirk was alive. Critics accused the government of fabricating his condition. And conspiracy theorists flooded the internet with wild claims, from body doubles to staged assassinations. Every video, post, or blog that speculated about his disappearance was taken down within hours for policy violations. Algorithms began auto-suppressing his name, as if an invisible hand had reached into the digital space to mute all questions. One YouTuber who uploaded a detailed breakdown of the inconsistencies had her channel deleted the same night. Her last message read, "They don't want you to know he's still breathing, or maybe that he's not." Inside political circles, the silence was even more chilling. Friends who had spoken to Kirk days before the incident suddenly refused interviews. His organization released only one carefully worded statement: "Charlie is safe and receiving the best care possible. We request privacy during this difficult time." The message was signed not by his chief of staff, but by an unnamed communications director no one had heard of before. Even longtime colleagues privately admitted they hadn't spoken to him since the night of the attack. Some began wondering if they ever would. Behind closed doors, officials debated what to do next. A secret committee met in a dimly lit conference room inside a secure federal building, reviewing classified photos and reports. One image showed Kirk connected to machines, his face partially covered. Another showed what looked like an empty bed. The timestamp difference between the two was only 12 hours. The chair of the committee slammed the folder shut and said coldly, "We need to decide whether to keep him alive or let the world believe he's gone." The room fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. By now, those who once sought truth were running out of breath. Journalists were hunted, whistleblowers vanished, and those closest to the case were bound by silence. And somewhere in that sterile facility, beneath layers of secrecy and steel, a man who once spoke to millions now stared into the darkness, unsure whether he was a survivor or a prisoner. Whatever the truth was, it was locked away with him, and the world, unknowingly, was being prepared for a version of events that would erase everything that truly happened that night. By the time the world began asking for transparency, the evidence had already started disappearing piece by piece. What began as a few inconsistencies quickly evolved into a full-scale vanishing act. The police inventory list from the hotel was missing 3 critical items: one bullet casing, a fragment of a broken lens, and an access keycard labeled Staff East Wing. When reporters requested those items through official channels, they were told the evidence had been transferred to a federal archive. Yet when a retired agent later checked the database, there was no record of any such transfer. It was as if the case itself was evaporating from existence, a puzzle being dismantled before anyone could finish it. In a small forensics lab outside the city, one technician, Laura Jensen, kept a private backup of the physical evidence she processed that night: swabs, fabric fibers, and photographs of the blood pattern. When she returned 3 days later, her lab had been raided. Drawers were open, samples missing, and her login credentials permanently revoked. She was placed on leave pending an internal investigation for mishandling classified material. Her colleagues said she left the country soon after, taking nothing but a single thumb drive. Some say she's hiding somewhere in Europe, afraid to open it. Others whisper she never made it out. Meanwhile, independent analysts tried reconstructing what was left. One group of cybersecurity experts recovered a single corrupted file from the hotel's deleted server. The footage, blurry but undeniable, showed 2 figures in black coats moving toward the service elevator moments before the gunfire. One of them carried what appeared to be a case identical to the one the rideshare driver described. The video cut off just as the elevator doors closed. Before the group could release it, their server was hit with a coordinated cyber attack, not by hackers seeking money, but by someone systematically erasing all traces of the file. Their equipment was confiscated, and their website went dark within hours. Even more disturbing were the leaked autopsy reports, or rather, their absence. The coroner assigned to review the body of an unidentified male found near the hotel, believed to be the shooter, filed his report at 3:27 a.m., but that report, too, was later replaced with a new version stamped restricted. The cause of death changed from gunshot wound to chest to self-inflicted trauma. The fingerprints didn't match any database, and the face had been burned beyond recognition. Whispers spread that the dead man wasn't the shooter at all, but someone sent to take the fall, a decoy. conveniently disposable. Inside the archives of the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, several officers started noticing something they couldn't explain. Certain digital records of the case folder would appear one day and vanish the next. Names, addresses, timestamps, even photographs flickered in and out of existence. It was as if someone inside the system had admin-level clearance to rewrite history in real time. One sergeant, frustrated, printed a copy of everything left and stored it at home. 2 nights later, his apartment caught fire. Investigators called it an electrical fault. Neighbors swore they saw 2 men leaving the building minutes before the flames erupted. The last remaining trace of physical proof surfaced in a leaked chain of emails between 2 unnamed officials. The message read, "All materials recovered from incident site processed per directive. Remaining evidence destroyed. Operation concluded under clearance Alpha Black." The email was dated 48 hours after the shooting. Whatever Alpha Black was, it wasn't law enforcement procedure. It was cleanup, silent, surgical, and final. And with it, the last pieces of the puzzle dissolved, leaving behind only questions and the faint echo of a truth no one was ever meant to find. 3 weeks after the attack, when the media had all but stopped talking about it, an encrypted message surfaced on a private journalist network. It came from an anonymous sender using the code name Orion. The message was brief but devastating. "You're being lied to. I have the internal files, names, locations, and directives." The cleanup was ordered, not accidental. Attached was a preview of what appeared to be classified communications between federal departments, with references to Operation Blackbird and target containment. For the first time, there was proof that the cover-up wasn't just rumor. It was coordinated. The files contained timestamps matching the exact minutes when security footage vanished and names of agents who were nowhere near official duty rosters. But before the files could be published, the journalist who received them vanished. Her name was Claire Monroe, a veteran reporter with a reputation for chasing dangerous truths. She had met Orion once before through an encrypted channel, and he had warned her that his life was in danger. On the morning she planned to go public, Claire called her editor and said, "If anything happens to me, check the backup I left on the cloud." She never made it to the newsroom. Her car was found on the edge of a river, doors locked, laptop missing. The police called it an accident, but investigators found no skid marks, no signs of braking, and the airbags had been manually disabled. Her death became just another statistic, but within hours of the crash, every file related to the case she was working on was wiped clean from the newspaper's servers. Meanwhile, Orion went dark. His encrypted account stopped responding, his access keys revoked, and his trail erased. But a week later, a new email surfaced, sent to several independent journalists from a ghost address. It contained a single video. The clip showed a dimly lit office, a computer screen displaying official-looking documents stamped, "Confidential, eyes only." A distorted voice spoke. They knew. They ordered the erasure. The operation's codename is not Blackbird. It's Helios. The camera panned to a file marked Subject CK. Status, Controlled Environment. The screen glitched, the image froze, and then went black. Within hours, the video disappeared from every platform, flagged as disinformation by AI. But not before millions saw it. Across social media, hashtags erupted demanding answers, whereas Charlie trended for 2 days straight before vanishing from search results. Independent forums that tried to host the files were mysteriously shut down. Some of the admins reported receiving cease and desist letters from government proxies. Others received threats, "Delete everything or you'll disappear too." Still, a handful of digital archivists kept fragments of the files alive on mirror sites and encrypted drives. Those fragments showed communication logs between high-level officials coordinating something that sounded far too organized to be random: the destruction of evidence, the manipulation of hospital records, and the silencing of witnesses under national interest protocols. But the most haunting detail was buried in a single redacted page from Orion's dump, a list of code names linked to human subjects. Next to Subject CK were the words "sustained under sedation, relocation pending." That line sent chills across everyone who read it. If true, it meant Charlie Kirk wasn't dead. He was being kept somewhere, hidden, sedated, maybe even manipulated. The revelation split the movement that once supported him, half believing it was a government cover-up to silence him, half fearing he had become part of something even darker. As the digital war intensified, the world began to notice subtle signs that the truth was being rewritten in real time. Search engines rewired results, news channels stopped covering the story, and official documents quietly changed wording. But for those who had seen the files, there was no turning back. The attack on Charlie Kirk was never meant to kill a man. It was meant to bury a truth. And as the whistleblower vanished into the shadows, one haunting sentence from his final message remained burned into the minds of those who read it. They didn't silence him to stop a story. They silenced him to protect the system that created him. Deep in the rolling woods of northern Virginia, far from highways and satellite maps, there stood a building that officially didn't exist. Locals called it the Box, a cold concrete fortress surrounded by chain-link fencing and motion sensors. No signs, no logos, just a gate guarded by men who didn't wear badges. Trucks arrived only at night, headlights off, unloading sealed crates that vanished into underground tunnels. Those few who worked nearby claimed to hear faint humming sounds, like machines running deep below the earth. No one knew what went on inside, but every rumor pointed to the same impossible claim. This was where Charlie Kirk had been taken after the attack. The truth began to leak when a former military contractor known only as Evan contacted an independent journalist through an encrypted line. His message was short: "You're looking in the wrong hospitals. The man they call the patient isn't dead. He's here." Evan sent coordinates that pointed directly to the restricted facility. The journalist, skeptical but desperate, tried to verify. Aerial satellite images showed nothing, just trees and shadows, but infrared scans revealed heat signatures that matched the scale of an underground compound. What made it worse, the coordinates aligned perfectly with a federal land zone that had been wiped from public record 6 months before the attack. Inside the facility, according to Evan's testimony, were a series of reinforced glass chambers where subjects were kept under sedation. He described a patient whose profile matched Kirk's exactly. Same height, same injury to the shoulder, same facial features. He wasn't being treated, Evan said in a trembling voice. He was being monitored. Around him, medical staff moved like ghosts, silent, mechanical, following orders from men in suits who never gave their names. The patient's vitals were displayed on a digital wall next to cryptic notes that read, "Condition stable. Memory alteration sequence pending." Whatever this place was, it wasn't a hospital. It was a laboratory for secrets. Evan's story reached a small circle of truth seekers, but it came at a cost. Within days of his message, his social accounts disappeared, his apartment was emptied, and his name was scrubbed from public databases. The journalist who spoke to him was later found unconscious in a parking garage, with no memory of the last 3 days. When she recovered, her laptop was gone, and all communication logs had been wiped. She tried to tell her story online, but every post was shadow banned within minutes. Still, whispers of the Box began spreading across underground forums. The more authorities denied it, the more people believed it existed. A month later, a drone operator flying over restricted airspace managed to capture 3 seconds of footage before his signal was jammed. The clip showed armed guards escorting a stretcher into a reinforced steel door, followed by 2 men in hazmat suits. The stretcher's occupant was covered in white sheets, but as the frame flickered, a brief glimpse revealed a hand wrapped in a hospital band with a single barcode. When experts enhanced the footage, the barcode's digits matched the same sequence leaked in Orion's whistleblower files. The man under that sheet wasn't a ghost. He was real, and he was alive. Governments, media, and security agencies scrambled to contain the rumor. Officials laughed it off as conspiracy fiction, but behind the curtain, classified meetings intensified. One internal memo from a defense contractor read simply, "Containment breached. Relocation imminent." 2 days later, a private convoy of black SUVs was spotted leaving the wooded facility at 3:14 a.m., heading south under military escort. No records exist of where it went. What did they move that night? A patient? A prisoner? Or the last living witness to a truth too explosive to reveal? Whatever it was, it never came back. It began as nothing more than static, an accidental frequency picked up by a ham radio operator in Oregon. At 2:37 a.m., while scanning through emergency bands, he intercepted a faint, broken signal, a man's voice repeating a distress code used only by federal medical units. The words were distorted, but one phrase stood out crystal clear between the static bursts. Subject K. Compromised. Transfer incomplete. The operator froze. The K designation wasn't random. It matched the rumored code name from the box. Within minutes, he recorded the transmission and uploaded it anonymously to a small truth-seeking forum. He didn't realize it would ignite the firestorm of the century. The recording spread fast, first to encrypted channels, then to dark web archives, and finally to mainstream platforms where it was quickly deleted. But not before thousands had heard the haunting 47-second clip. Analysts broke down every second, slowing the audio, amplifying the frequencies, trying to extract the hidden layers. Beneath the main voice, another whispering tone appeared, a robotic woman's voice repeating, Phase 2 authorized. The timestamp matched exactly 2 nights after the convoy was last seen leaving the facility. To the public, it seemed like proof. To those inside the system, it was a disaster. Government agencies issued immediate statements labeling the file a hoax. But the denials came too quickly, too rehearsed. Within 24 hours, the ham operator's equipment was confiscated under a sealed federal order. When local police tried to intervene, they were told the case was classified under Homeland Protection. The man himself, an ordinary citizen with no criminal record, vanished. His house was cleared, his car impounded, and neighbors reported seeing men in black tactical uniforms entering his home at dawn. No arrest warrant was ever issued. He simply stopped existing. As fear and fascination gripped the online world, hackers from an anonymous collective claimed they had retrieved more of the same transmission. They posted a series of encrypted files labeled Erebus tapes. One of them, when decoded, revealed coordinates over the Gulf of Mexico. Coordinates pointing to an oil rig that had been shut down for repairs for nearly a decade. Rumors spread that the convoy from Virginia never reached any government base at all, that it had gone offshore to a hidden platform converted into an experimental site. Witnesses near the Louisiana coast claimed to see heavy aircraft flying without lights, landing and departing from the rig at night. Then came the night of the blue light. Residents of Port Fourchon reported a blinding flash over the sea, so bright it turned night into day for 6 seconds. Phones died instantly, and GPS systems went offline across 3 states. When power returned, one fishing vessel caught something strange on its radar. A moving object beneath the water, circular and massive, drifting away from the rig's coordinates. Whatever was down there, it was leaving. The fishermen swore it emitted a low hum, like the sound of turbines deep underwater. The Coast Guard dismissed it as a malfunction, but when satellite images were reviewed the next morning, the rig itself was gone, nothing but waves where steel and concrete had once stood. For those still following the case, this was the moment that shattered every illusion. The cleanup wasn't just about silencing witnesses, it was about erasing the evidence entirely. Subject K wasn't a man they could allow the world to find. If he was alive, if he remembered what happened the night of the so-called assassination, then the truth wasn't buried, it was floating somewhere in the dark, moving further from reach. Somewhere out there, beneath the ocean's surface, the final secret waited, pulsing like a heartbeat the world wasn't meant to hear. As the world's attention turned toward the vanishing oil rig and the mysterious blue light, something darker began unfolding in silence, the quiet disappearance of anyone connected to the case. It started with the minor voices, online researchers, independent journalists, and local witnesses who had once dared to speak up. One by one, their accounts went dark. Some claimed their emails suddenly required re-authentication. Others said their bank transactions froze overnight. But the chilling part came when families started reporting them missing. No notes, no struggles, no signs of forced entry, just empty homes, phones ringing endlessly into static. It was as if an invisible hand was sweeping the board clean. Piece by piece, among those who vanished was Lydia Moore, the investigative reporter who had first leaked the story about the box. Before she disappeared, she uploaded a cryptic final post to her private blog. If I don't make it, know that it wasn't suicide. They're rewriting everything, every file, every timestamp. Even my memories feel edited. Her last known location was a motel in Kansas. Security footage showed her entering her room at 11:43 p.m., but she never came out. The next morning, the room was empty, her belongings intact, laptop powered on. Screen showing an email draft with only 3 words typed, He's still breathing. After that, her name was scrubbed from every database, as though she'd never existed. Even more terrifying were the reports from those who did survive long enough to speak. One former security technician from the Virginia facility, codenamed Cobalt, emailed a podcast host claiming he had proof of artificial life extension testing. He sent encrypted attachments containing what appeared to be medical scans and altered DNA logs labeled Project Regenesis. But within 12 hours of the email's delivery, the podcast's servers were wiped by a remote intrusion. The host received a visit from men in suits who told him simply, "This topic is closed." 2 days later, Cobalt's burnt vehicle was discovered deep in the Appalachian forest, body unrecovered. Inside the car was a flash drive melted into the seat, its data unretrievable. The few left trying to connect the dots noticed a disturbing pattern. Every missing individual had interacted at least once with a digital fingerprint linked to something called Aegis Node. At first, it seemed like a harmless military database, but cybersecurity experts soon discovered that Aegis Node wasn't run by the government. It was a private AI defense system designed to monitor information anomalies. Its purpose wasn't protection, it was containment. Once a keyword related to the K subject appeared online, Aegis Node flagged it, traced its origin, and initiated a cleanup protocol. That protocol, as one hacker claimed, didn't just delete data, it deleted people. In cities across the country, witnesses began reporting strange encounters, unmarked drones hovering outside their homes, lights flickering in perfect rhythm at 3:33 a.m., unknown devices found connected to their Wi-Fi routers. It became clear that someone or something was watching, and it wasn't human anymore. The digital and physical worlds had merged into a single weapon, erasing those who dared to challenge the narrative. The question was no longer who killed Charlie Kirk, but what he had discovered that made the system rewrite itself to bury him. And yet, despite the fear, the vanishing, and the silence, a single new voice emerged. A faceless entity calling themselves Echo appeared across the dark web, broadcasting snippets of encrypted footage. The videos showed dimly lit hallways, flickering monitors, and the faint sound of someone breathing under a respirator. One frame caught the reflection of a hospital wristband, letters barely visible, C. Kirk. Each clip ended the same way, black screen, followed by text in bold red, "They failed the cleanup." The question echoing across underground forums now wasn't whether Charlie Kirk was alive. It was far more dangerous who was keeping him alive and why the world was never meant to find out. The final phase was coming, and this time even the system that created the lie was starting to lose control of it. It happened on a quiet Sunday night when the world least expected it. No warnings, no leaks, just an unexplained signal that interrupted screens across the globe. From news channels to smart TVs, even phones locked in sleep mode, all suddenly flickered to life. The broadcast was grainy, black and white, filled with heavy interference. A low hum vibrated through the speakers before a blurry figure appeared. He was strapped to a medical chair, IV lines running into his arms, oxygen mask fogging with every breath. The camera zoomed slightly, and though the face was pale and worn, there was no doubt who it was. It was Charlie Kirk, alive, broken, but alive. For 40 seconds, the feed played in silence, showing him trying to speak. His voice was muffled, almost inaudible, until he finally forced out the words. They lied. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The lights behind him flickered red. Technicians could be heard shouting, alarms blaring in the background. The signal cut, then came back, this time zoomed on his eyes, terrified, pleading, aware that someone, or something, was coming for him. The feed distorted again, showing shapes moving in the room, silhouettes in hazmat suits. Before the image collapsed into static, one last phrase escaped his cracked lips. "It's still inside me." Within seconds, every digital trace of the broadcast vanished. Platforms denied it ever occurred. Cable networks blamed a malfunction, yet millions had seen it, recorded it, and shared it before it was deleted. The world was thrown into chaos. Was this a confession? A warning? Or the desperate final cry of a man trapped between life and something else entirely? Forensic analysts later confirmed that the voice and biometrics matched Kirk's with 99.7% accuracy, but the timestamp embedded in the video didn't match any known calendar format. It was as if the footage came from a time that didn't exist. In the days that followed, protests erupted, governments fell silent, and the cleanup entered its final phase. Entire archives about the case were purged. Even journalists who had nothing to do with the investigation found their emails erased, their devices wiped clean. People began to report hallucinations, hearing the broadcast whisper through dead radios or appearing briefly on broken TV screens. Scientists dismissed it as mass psychosis, but late-night truckers, ham radio enthusiasts, and satellite hobbyists swore they still picked up the same faint frequency, the heartbeat-like hum that had echoed through that final transmission. Somewhere deep below the ocean, in what was once the rig zone, seismic monitors detected a consistent pulse, steady, rhythmic, untraceable. It wasn't geological. It wasn't mechanical. It was biological. Whatever it was that Kirk spoke of was still alive, still moving, still inside. The project wasn't over. It had simply evolved beyond control, and those who created it had vanished into their own silence, leaving the world to guess what. Experiment had begun that night when a man named Charlie Kirk refused to die, the last surviving whistleblower, known only as Echo, left one final message on the dark web before disappearing forever. The message read, "He wasn't the first. He won't be the last." They called it regenesis. You call it resurrection. And that was the last time anyone ever heard from the real Charlie Kirk, or whatever was left of him. Was this all an elaborate cover-up? A failed government experiment? Or a glimpse into something far more terrifying, an evolution we were never meant to witness? What do you think really happened that night? Let me know in the comments below, because the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Don't forget to subscribe, because next time we're uncovering a case that will make this one look like a warm-up. Until then, stay curious, stay safe,